Welcome to Artcasters, episode 343. Sorry for the late start. We had a couple technical issues, which should be resolved now. We're gonna introduce Gerald here in a minute, but before we do that, let's kind of do the rounds. Scott, where can we find your stuff?
You can find my stuff at circworks.com. That's my website, and I've got a ton of tools for mostly geared towards comic book artists. I've got the Comic Maker Toolkit. I've got the amazing Comic Book World Builder. All things that are just packed with templates and fonts and halftones and all kinds of cool stuff to help you create comics. So I've got that stuff. My prints and my comics are also available there. And you can find me on my YouTube channel at circworks.com. At Circworks Art Labs on YouTube. And there you will also find the series Making Comics 101, which is a soup to nuts course on how to make comics, everything from coming up with your idea to printing, publishing, and every step in between. And you can either follow that course all the way through. It's totally free and everything. Or you can just pick and choose. Say, I just want to learn about lettering, or I just want to learn about inking or whatever. It's all available. So it's pretty much the most comprehensive course you're going to find on how to make comics on YouTube, especially for free anywhere, I would say.
Cool. That's awesome. And I would, highly recommend checking that stuff out. Super good. And Josh, where can we find your stuff?
Awesome. Yeah, I am Joshua Kemble. You can check out music that was just released by my band No Saboteurs at any streaming platform. Just look up No Saboteurs and look for No Emperors and Good Bees Don't Die if you're into some post-hardcore or some weird experimental indie music. And then there's Jacob's Apartment, which is my graphic novel that is kind of has the flavor of if you mixed Ghost World and Eternal Sunshine for a Spotless Mind. You put them in a blender and you like that flavor. This is a story about two roommates going through different identity crises and pursuing their dreams in both the real waking and sleeping world. And it's a doomed romance story, and it took me about 5 years. So 5 years for about $20. If you're lucky, you might find it on Amazon for like 15. I think it's worth 5 years. So prove me right on that. And then if we're going by half a decade, another half a decade is Two Stories, which is my graphic novel about faith and mental illness, which is hand-lettered, hand-inked, and handed to you in print on Amazon.com at a reasonable price. So those are my wares.
Cool. And as always, you can find my stuff. You're on my channel, so you can if you're not subscribed, you can subscribe, and you can find my stuff at just myname.com. So that'd be CoreyKerr.com. And I've got some newer things that I haven't really described what I'm doing yet, but you should see 2 or 3 new kind of illustrations up there. It's kind of a series of things. And if you want to learn more about that, you can jump onto my email newsletter. So that would be CoreyKerr.com/email, and you'll get roughly an email a week, but probably no more than an email a week, and sometimes less than that. So it's not going to be super overwhelming, but a good way to kind of keep in touch with what's going on. All right, Gerald, tell us who you are and where we can find your stuff, and then we can kind of like jump into the topic here.
I'm Gerald. I'm a graphic designer, a freelance artist, illustrator. I work for a local company. I loosely say graphic design, but I've been making t-shirts, web design, ads, billboards, print, digital, just everything. I'm a one-man studio here. Also, I've worked for Curious Media. If you see Rosie Rules game on PBS Kids, I did a bunch of assets and stuff for that. And right now you can find me on Instagram at twoheadedgiant.com or twoheadedgiant. And there's a link tree there that's got a bunch of links to, you can find stickers, shirts, and other things that I've made as well. So
yeah, I have quite a few of your stickers, and they're really well designed, really awesome. So let's talk about, and if anybody's looking for that link, the link is in the description. You can see the link tree to Gerald's stuff.
Yeah, definitely
Um,
check it out. There's some cool stuff there. I was looking at it before the
yeah,
show.
yeah. I always like seeing when you put new stuff out. I feel like you and I have a similar kind of thinking person's kind of illustration where you're trying to get like a
Yeah,
message across in the thing as well, which is fun.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
I love art for art's sake and illustration. Telling the story and stuff. But we live in such a hectic world right now, and there's so much information, misinformation, disinformation, and so I always want to like try to you know, hey, this is what's really happening. Like we're being divided
Mhm.
by outside forces, not you know we're fighting amongst each other when we shouldn't be.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so you suggested the topic of like what is an artist,
Yeah,
um, which I think is really interesting, especially with like everything that's going on right now with AI art, and that, I mean, it kind of, years ago you needed people to do stuff that has since been automated. Simple things like I was at Adobe Max. This is a few years ago, and I had spent so much time getting really good at like clipping backgrounds out of photographs, and like I had like a team of people that would like shoot photographs and then clip the backgrounds out, and they meticulously use masks and polygonal lasso tools and all that stuff. And then at Adobe Max they just announced like, hey, you can push a button now, and it's still not quite push button, but it's like so much easier than it used to be. And I remember being like kind of like disappointed, but I hate clipping backgrounds. It wasn't like something like I enjoyed doing, but I feel like I felt this like protectionist mentality where I was like, you're giving away the secret sauce, or whatever it is.
right, right,
And and so it's kind of interesting. And since then, all kinds of things have gotten automated, and now we're looking at kind of like an existential threat of, if you can type words into a machine and the machine produces art, then what is an artist? Is the
right.
machine an artist? And what differentiates us, as illustrators and designers from, this kind of mass produced weirdness that's going on? So yeah, so what are your why did you want to kind of bring that up? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Oh man, it kind of brings me back to the days when photo bashing was starting. I
Mm-hmm.
remember being in school and I wanted to be an environment artist, and then I started learning about the industry and then just seeing that most environments is just collage of pictures together and brushes hiding the seams.
Yeah.
And I was like really disappointed at that. Um, and so yeah, it just really shifted where I went as an artist, and then so it really got me thinking at that point, like what really is an artist then? If we are just taking stock photos and images or whatever we find and just manipulating it into a whole new thing,
Mm-hmm.
is that doesn't really take, I don't know, I guess everything that I learned in school from principal elements of design, composition, value, lighting, color theory, on and on and on, where now I saw an online argument on Reddit about AI art, and the person that's just typing in the prompt is now considered an artist. And it's just like, but they didn't do anything. It's almost like you're a client telling an artist to do it, but since the artist doesn't have sentience, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
you can claim it as your own and say, I did that.
Right.
It's just, I don't know. It's just really got me questioning, like, what is art, and where are we going as artists, and how do we define that now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So like one of the things that I'm discussing with some of my students now, so you took the class that I'll be talking about years ago. And in this class, I'm teaching people how to use Adobe Illustrator and types of things like that. And I tell them every semester, and I've been doing this now for like 9 years. And I say, listen, if you are going to rely on your ability in the software to make this stuff, then you're gonna be in trouble, because eventually a lot of this is just going to be automated. Like if you're holding on to this secret technique of like, you know, which buttons to push or which tools to use, that's not where it is. The value is in the thinking and in the creativity and in the emotional connection that you can create. And if you're relying on, well, I know how to push the buttons and you don't know how to push the buttons, eventually those buttons are going to get easier and consolidated and everybody will be able to push them because there's fewer buttons, you know?
Right.
And so the real value is, you know, I mean, if like I said this on a different stream, but like, if you look at like one of Josh's books, a robot cannot write that book. Like it couldn't happen because there's real humanity in those books, you know? And then you look at like stuff that Scott's doing and I look at some of like I've got, do I have that on? I have one of his pens that is one of my favorite things where it has like the nostalgia of the technology of the 80s, but it's not like a recreation of anything that existed back then. It's like a new thing that Scott invented. And you can't really get like the same type of thinking and the same level of things kind of through that. And so there's a level of humanity behind the art that I think makes it an artist that's different than the execution or the production of the visuals. Because there's kind of like, and I remember first coming across this concept. This is a way out in left field thing, but I was reading Anna Karenina, and there's a character in Anna Karenina where he's like a painter, and he gets really frustrated when people talk about his technique. You know, and every time somebody compliments one of his paintings, they compliment his technique as if his skill with the brush is what he's bringing to the table rather than his humanity and his thinking and whatever. You know, because I know lots of people that have learned how to photorealistically render something, but they don't think things through. And so what they make doesn't connect with anybody because it's boring. It looks interesting, but there's no substance to it. And so there's no reason to interact with it or to feel anything from it.
Okay. Yeah, and I know a lot of people are always impressed with the skill that goes behind something like that, definitely. Mm-hmm. But yeah, exactly. Where's the emotional connection?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, Josh and Scott, what do you think? What is there a difference between a machine that produces art and an artist? And if so, what do you think is that difference?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a difference. Like, I mean, I look at the stuff that's generated by AI, and I mean, I would definitely call it art, but is the person that generated that an artist? I don't know if I would call them an artist necessarily, especially if it's just, I mean, if it depends how you're using it. If you're using it as a tool to generate ideas, so you're building off of that, then yeah. But if you just type in prompts and you get whatever it spits out, I don't know that. To me, I don't know that makes you an artist. And I think you mentioned this before, which, you know, Corey, that kind of, to me, ideas are cheap. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I mean, there's the fact that you can combine 2 or 3 different things, put them into an AI and generates it. It's kind of like, that's why I never really got, for the most part, enthusiastic about mashups. And I've done mashups before. You know, it's fun and everything like that, but it really, unless there's certain situations where it just clicks and it makes perfect sense. I mentioned the one that I did that Tron Burgundy one, which I think that one really made sense, not only because it's the play on words, but just the visuals. If you look at both the Tron poster and the Anchorman poster, they're very similar in the pose. And so taking those 2 things, combine it made sense. But they're you know, and I remember seeing some mashups and things like that, that's really clever. But then it just became whatever. You mash 2 things up and there really wasn't any reason behind it, or, you know. So to me, that's kind of what AI is. You're just mashing things together, and it seems simple because it's not, you know, it doesn't impress me, I guess I would say. Although, you know, I say that, and then I do look at some of this AI stuff, and I'm pretty impressed by what I'm looking at, what it can do. Which it's a little bit scary, but it's also it's not the first time that we've something like this has come up. Like Gerald was talking about with the photo bashing. What and I don't know. I had a different when I first saw how they were doing that. I guess I had a different reaction, and to me, it was like, oh wow, that's interesting. That's no wonder they can get this stuff done so quick, and how they were able to kind of start with these different photos and then kind of paint over it and become something entirely new. And I totally get it because a lot of these productions, they're under so much pressure to they got to put out tons of stuff before they get to something where the director or whoever looks at it and says, oh yeah, this is cool, I like this. I think in those industries, I think AI is going to really I think in that instance, it's probably going to take a few jobs, and you're going to have a lot of AI generating stuff, and then then you have some art directors that kind of look things over and then say, okay, let's go this direction, to hand it over to artists. But I don't think it's going to take a team of people coming up with just give us all your ideas at once. So it's going to change certain industries like that. But yeah, I guess in summary, I guess it's art. I don't know what is to say. What is art and what is an artist? To me, those are two different questions.
Right.
If it because I can look at an AI generated image and I can say, and it can have an effect on me. It can have an emotion. I can have an emotional response for that. So in that case, yeah, I would say it's probably art. But to be an artist, I think there's more to it than just I got an idea. Or if I was just to say, like we talked about this too, but a client that hires an artist to do something, if the client gives them, okay, I'm looking for something like that, does that make the client the artist, or does it make the artist who's taking those ideas and coming up with something, the artist? So
yeah.
So maybe. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say, I tend to think the important thing in it is communication and intention, to me, are really big things that I associate with art. And it's like one of those things of like, so technique is like, I always use this example of like, I think the most boring kind of art class type thing would be like, okay, we're going to render a duck. We're all going to render a duck, and we're going to render it like as close as possible to this photograph. And if you had a gallery show with like a bunch of perfectly rendered ducks, you'd have people walk in there, not be able to know who any artist is, and go, yeah, that's definitely a duck.
Yes, those are ducks.
Whereas when you have like expression and intention, then usually you're going to have a moment where you walk into a gallery and go, like, who drew this duck? Like, no one draws a duck like this.
Yeah.
And then you look at the name, and usually there's an idea beyond just like, here's a picture of a duck. There's some kind of intention being expressed. And I think, to me, that's where I would call like the difference between AI, where I don't think the AI algorithm has no intention. It's just a prompted intention, and I don't think that counts as art, honestly.
That makes me, one of the things that sometimes kind of stuck in my craw a little bit, and you see a lot of artists who are like photorealistic artists, or who can take an image like a photograph and just render it and duplicate it, and you look at that, and there's so much technical skill in doing that. But I've noticed when a lot of people, I would say particularly people who aren't artists, when they see that, to them, that's the pinnacle of art. Like, this guy made it look exactly like the real thing, and AI is going to do that. AI is going to be able to do that so easily. Like, add a little effect, like if you want to take something and like a portrait, but make it look like stipple. And they've had software and stuff that can do that forever. But I mean, I think there's going to be a little more shift to more stylized stuff, because whereas the average person looks at somebody who can just duplicate something so photorealistic and just be wowed by that, once AI can do that and do that so quickly. I
Yeah.
think people might shift into like, okay, well, let's maybe I'm more interested in something that's totally that isn't that's more stylized, and as a illustrator does comics or something that doesn't necessarily, and one, because I'm not as technically proficient as a lot of these people that can do this hyper realistic stuff, but I think people are going to be looking for more stylistic stuff.
So that kind of brings me to what I think would be a really interesting kind of take on this is, we can discuss, what is art or what is AI or, or AI, but I think really I think a good aspect of this question is, so this exists. So what now for me? You know what I mean? And a lot of my
Mhm.
students, I mean, how does this apply to Gerald? Like,
Right.
let's say, so Gerald, you've had some success in your career. You're looking for doing certain things, and you're kind of in a position of, like you were talking to me about, like, I'm not sure if I should focus on my own branding or if I should create something or if I should jump into somebody else's thing, or you're kind of at this crossroads. And so I'm kind of curious in the discussion, like if the three of you, if I could put you in front of one of my classes, what would you tell them as advice to like moving forward? So moving forward for like a young artist right now, like it is what it is, it exists. What do you think the smartest path is to take?
I can tell you, I don't know if it's smart, whether it's the smartest path, but the one I'm going down, because I mean, right now, I mean, I could definitely see applications where I could use AI to help generate ideas and do certain things. I don't know if at least right now, I'm necessarily interested in pursuing those. For me, and I was thinking, I was kind of planning on going this direction anyway, but for me, especially with AI kind of being what it is and being available and everything now, I'm more interested in like process, or showing people how to do things, or showing. I think if somebody can see how something comes together more, because that's absent from AI. You don't see. I mean, it happens in milliseconds, that how that all works, and so there's
Yeah.
nothing to see there. Whereas if you actually see somebody make, I don't want to say performance art, but have some performance to your art. But you know what I mean, where and people do live stream, or people stream their artwork and all that, and yeah, that's part of it. But I think something more, if there's some way to where the actual process is part of the art itself, you know, and what people are interested in, if they can see something happening, maybe happening in a way that typically people aren't doing it, um, and then whatever that finished piece is, um, people that people have witnessed it happen, they want a piece of that. Um, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, no, it totally does, because there's a bit of experience that comes with it. And so like a lot of people will buy art to like commemorate an experience that they had or
yeah,
capture an
yeah,
emotion or a thought. And so if you can create either collaboratively or publicly in a way where it's part of someone's experience, then they'll want to kind of capture that.
yeah. The experience is probably the word I was searching for. That you nailed it there.
I
Well, I
think I
Yeah.
know.
would I think I would advise people, like, you can't just make stuff that fills landfills. And like, a lot of what you're going to do as a professional artist is make stuff that fills landfills. It's just
Yep.
like
Mhm.
useless crap. And it's the useless crap that you're being hired to do. And honestly, like, a lot of it might be fun and stuff like that, but that's usually the type of thing that will be automated. And so professionally, especially if you're going to be working in house somewhere, like, you should probably be hip to like what is going on with AI, because it's a technology that once it can be implemented in workflows, it will be, if it cuts time and increases productivity, right?
Mhm.
However,
Well, that's
at,
that's scary because that's my job. That's graphic design.
yeah, but the key thing is, like, I think that as artists, like, with the capital A artists, right? we need to think about like communicating authentically, and authenticity and customization is never going to go out of style. Like I think if you're making art and you're communicating something and you're focusing on the communication part of graphic design, there's rarely going to be a good automation of that process, because like while you can type a prompt, a graphic designer like Milton Glazer's "I Heart New York" is never going to not be a great design. That was a wonderful concept. It wasn't the execution that made that a good design, it was the concept. And I think more conceptual thinking and more conceptual based thinking is going to be huge, especially when stuff that's just like a rote idea can just be punched in, typed in, and executed instantly.
Yeah, because when I see, like, as far as graphic design goes, when I see some of the stuff that the AI is creating as far as graphic design,
Yeah, it's not.
it's not. I mean, it's like, okay, so we're doing, like, it'll come up with a good typeface that looks good with whatever image. It'll be some kind of clip arty type. Oh, it's an elephant or whatever. But there's more. I mean, when you see really good like logo designs, there's I don't know if I just can't see AI ever being able to be that creative. Like when you see, I don't know, like something like the Baskin Robbins logo where it's got the hidden 31 as part of the thing, or the Fed. You see all these hidden things in logos that, like with
the FedEx arrow,
with the arrow and all all that really that stuff that a lot of times people won't even pick up on it, but it's there, and and I think I don't know, and a lot of that stuff is things that never existed before that would even be in anything that AI is drawing from. So, I mean, sure, there's going to be, if you were one of these, and there's companies out there that do these real quick, cheap logos, and they just basically take, an image and then put a typeface, and it looks good, but it's kind of soulless, and it's kind of really generic, and almost any other company could use that same thing, and it just doesn't really. I mean, if you're just a mom and pop stuff and you just want to look nice, I guess it's good for that. But if you're actually, if you're a serious business, you want something original that's really going to stand out and everything. And I just don't think AI is going to be able to do that, at least not anytime in the near future.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is like AI might just like if somebody buys like 50 million credits for these AI things and then runs like 20 iterations of something, they might come up with something they kind of like. I think the revision process is another huge thing where like the key thing as like in visual communication again is communication. It's a two-way street where there's revision and there's kind of perfecting for a client. And it's like I mean, just kind of chiming into what Corey was originally saying, where he was saying like, what would you say with if you were talking to the class or whatever, I would point out, I'm old enough to remember when there was this disgusting trend in graphic design for about a year when Photoshop became more accessible to everyone. And so you had this phase of graphic design where like everybody was using like layer effects on everything. So everything was like beveled. Everything had like lens flares everywhere.
I still see people doing that.
Yeah. And
I had to redesign the comic book that I was doing because the existing logo would look like that. I'm like, ugh. Yeah.
And it's like, and people would do like rainbow gradients everywhere, and they'd get all crazy with the fonts, and like all the coffee shops in the world were like, we need to use curls, and all the youth groups were like, oh, papyrus, that's a perfect font, right? Like, yeah, this trend in just terrible typography, and then it died out pretty quickly, and you found that like the fundamentals of graphic design still stood. Like, so there were little automated tricks that made maybe like a couple of airbrush artists lose their jobs. But it's like a lot of those artists like who adapted and learned the new tools and then applied the old rules, like the old foundations, to like the new technology, like those are the people who lasted and still had careers. So I kind of think, I mean, I might be silly by saying this, but it's like I kind of don't think it's as much of an imminent threat as it, purports to be. But I agree with Scott on the fact that like a lot of that photo mashing concept work is gonna definitely be taking like a little bit of a hit.
Do you see yourself as an art director using any AI to kind of speed up your process or anything in any areas?
Currently, I haven't seen a use. I'm still kind of toying with it to see if I can come up with a prompt that'll trick it to kind of do the type of thing we do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like a crapshoot. Like it's pretty, again, like it could be a really good tool to at this point kind of come up with the iterations or maybe help come up with like a quick mashup of something we might want to use, but it's not precise enough to where it can do the kind of thing we need it to do.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, if it got really good, of course I'd implement it, right? Because like my half my job is like to make sure we get things done as quickly as possible with the highest productivity and the highest quality we can within short time frames. So yeah, if it gets better, I mean, it will be implemented probably, because our competitors would implement it. So yeah.
Gerald, jump in, man. You got to kind of talk over people. We've cut you off a couple times.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I know doing environment design, I would use SketchUp a lot and create these mock-ups, and so I can see like different angles, views, perspective, make it see, sure things look right or what's, overlapping, what's not, et cetera, et cetera. It was a great tool, and that's how I see like AI art as the same thing. It's just it's a way to quickly see what works, what doesn't.
Yeah.
And take like character design or something that extra step to see what what's functional and what's not. But the fact, like, one of the biggest things I hate is right now is that people calling themselves artists, like when they're creating this AI art, I don't know, I guess as an artist, even when you're speaking to a client, you have a vision of what you want. You can't get that precise vision through prompts, and I don't even think like the people who create these prompts even have a vision either. They're just like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if blah 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 blah, and then it creates an image. So because I know for me, one of the most successful clients I have is when I get them involved in the process. So they're there every step of the way, from concept drawings to refinements to color choice picks, and to the final product. And I think that's like answering your question, Corey, is that it's like get your client involved or get your art director involved. I know one of the biggest things I had was like, I feel intimidated when I worked at Curious Media. This was my first studio job. And I always felt like I'm asking too many questions, but the more feedback you get, the more successful a product you're going to create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are you thinking? What are you thinking of doing? Where do you want to be? Like, what would, like, if you could just like fast forward 3 to 5 years and be exactly where you wanted, doing what you wanted, what does that kind of look like?
Man, I guess like the logical side of me is just like steady work, if it's a studio, if it's, where I'm at now, it's a guaranteed paycheck, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's not exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
But but the dreamer in me is like, I just want to do my own marketing, my own branding of my own product, and really push those things.
Yeah.
I always lean more towards that than I do working a studio job.
Yeah. So And so when you talk about like your own products and things, you know, are you like balancing out, you know, like those two things? Because I think it's interesting, right? And if you look at what I'm doing, if you look at what Josh is doing, look at what Scott's doing, it's kind of a different combination of those two things. You know, we take on the work that makes us money, and then we do the work that, you know, that we love, and sometimes those things overlap and sometimes they don't.
Right.
But I mean, like Josh, you had what 15 years of like freelance where you weren't working for anybody else and you're doing your own thing. Is it about
Yeah.
15?
Approaching like 20 now, which is kind of, I mean,
Yeah.
doing art professionally, but about 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've moved into a day job. I've always been doing a day job. Scott, you started doing day jobs and then have kind of moved on to doing kind of your own thing.
I've
And
done. I just did my latest video on YouTube. If anyone's interested, I just went through my whole kind of work history, and it really is. It's working full time, working part time as an artist, doing freelance on the side, working full time freelance. You know, it's been, my journey has kind of been up and down, but currently, I've been doing everything. I guess I wouldn't even necessarily say freelance. Well, maybe. I mean, I guess the majority of my income is coming from freelance projects, but I also have other income streams and things like that. But that wasn't always the case. So my goal, and it's interesting how things change along the way. But when, you know, after I got laid off from my last full-time position as an artist, it's like, okay, this keeps happening, and you know, Gerald talks about a steady paycheck, which is kind of true, but kind of not true, because I've never worked at a place longer than 3 years, I think is the top, before I got laid off. And I've only quit one art job. The rest that I've had, you know, get laid off, or the company goes under, or whatever. There's myriad of things that just they don't tend to last. And, you know, to the point where every day I would go into a job, I'd be like, okay, is this my last day? Is this the day I find out that I'm laid off? And, you know, every day, seriously, too many days where I went in that I didn't think that, no matter how good the company was going, because I've just been through it enough, and I just knew. But so in the back of my head, I was always ready. You know, I was knew, okay, if I get delivered this news after the first 2 or 3 times, I'll survive. I'll figure something out. And then, but after that last time, I was just like, you know what? I'm kind of tired of giving to a company and just being a number. And when it comes down to the bottom line, you know, them letting you go. So I said, you know, I want to just do what I want to do on my own terms, and I don't really, if I have a choice in the matter, I'd rather not go work for another person, you know. So I've been doing that for a while, and it's worked out. And the funny thing is that once you get to the point where you're like, well, and then I didn't want to really I really didn't want to do it doing just freelance work. I wanted to, you know, build my own products and sell my own stuff and kind of that thing. And once you start doing that, and then you get, and once you start turning people away, because saying, oh, I don't really want to do any more freelance work. Then every once in a while you get one that's like, oh, well, we really want to work with you. What will it take? And then you can kind of name your price, and because if you don't care, you can name your price, and then they'll come back to you, and you can name some astronomical price, and they'll come back to you and say, okay, let's do it. And like, okay, we're doing this now. This is definitely worth my while. So it's, you know, I don't know. That's sort of where I am now. And a lot of that, you know, I've been doing this for so many years. I mean, it's really hard for me to give the advice to somebody, oh, well, just, do your own thing, you know, because it's not easy, but if you do enough of it, you kind of figure out how to do it. So my advice is, you know, if you can make it work, find, if you're single, whatever, if you can find a part-time art job. I've had a number of those, and then I just did my stuff on the side and build it. And maybe it doesn't have to be an art job. If you can find a good paying job that's part-time, and as long as you don't get burnt out and you can go home and be creative and build your own stuff on the side. I mean, that's what a lot of people do. Like, you know, here on YouTube, a lot of people that become big YouTubers, they'll work their job and they'll do YouTube on the side, and then it eventually gets to the point where they're making enough off of YouTube or whatever that they can quit their job and just do that full time. So that's a possibility. If you have a significant other who has a steady job, then maybe you're in a position where you go, well, let's try this out. Let me try to build my freelance while,
Right.
and you can just be the safety net for a little while. So, I mean, there's a number of ways to do it. And I feel like I've done just about everything. So,
yeah, I would actually, it's funny because like I like having a full-time job, and then it allows me to, when I'm not at the job, focus on weird things like comics that when I was freelance, I had no time for because I just couldn't turn down work. I was really bad at doing that. But I would give the advice to anybody who's like kind of secretly itching, like, I got to do freelance full time. Do it. Like, let the floor drop out a little bit. See what it's like. Honestly,
scary.
like the way I got into freelance, I was working in a house somewhere. I got kind of annoyed with the art director. I flipped them off. I walked out and I started working on my own. And I had been doing some t-shirt designs, and I was at no point even prepared for what was to come. But I'll tell you what, like having that need for income, and then the stubbornness of like, I'm going to make my income doing art, drove me into a really pretty decent career doing freelance, to the point where when I was finally at a point where I could apply for jobs, I had racked up so many like big clients and like interviews in newspapers and magazines, and like had my stuff in design annuals and all that stuff. So like when I had to apply for like an art director position, it was like I didn't feel like, oh, what am I doing here? Like, I felt like, oh yeah, I'm totally qualified for this position because I have all this experience and all this different stuff. So like I would highly recommend, if somebody's like secretly aching to like do the freelance thing, just do it. The worst, some people are in different circumstances. Maybe you have like mouths to feed or something like that, and then maybe you need to, but yeah, why not? I mean, give it a shot. I remember when I was freelance, I know Scott probably gets this a lot too, but I remember people being like, how do you pay for health insurance? And you're just like, and this was like pre-Obamacare, like where like nowadays, like there's much better insurance options, but
Right.
I still was insured, and people would be like, well, how do you deal without insurance? And you're just like, you just pay for insurance. And they're like, well, how does that happen? It's like, well, how does it happen at your job? Like,
Right.
So it's possible. And I think like you almost have to taste the lifestyle of that to know whether that's something you want to be in for a long time, or whether you prefer kind of being in-house. It just kind of depends on what you want. But yeah, I kind of fully back Scott's thing, but I'd almost say like be a little irresponsible about it. Just do it.
and I have a personality where my dream would quickly become a nightmare if that were the case, because I like the security of the day job because it frees me up financially to be able to do whatever I want.
Yes.
Because then if I've done this before, and I did it with photography, where I turned something that I loved into a money maker for me, and I began to hate it because then I was shooting weddings and senior photos and engagement photos, and I'm like, I hate this garbage. And I started to hate photography, and it was because I kind of, and I know that this isn't a super popular opinion, but I kind of ruined it with money. Like I very quickly became good enough to where I could have quit my job and just done photography, and I could have made a living doing it, and I would have been absolutely miserable. Whereas keeping my job and then being able to just create whatever I want in the evenings and the weekends.
Yeah.
I've gotten significantly better at those things that I haven't ruined by taking money for it, to where what Scott's describing is now kind of the situation where somebody comes to me, like it just happened. Like I had somebody reach out. I don't think I can talk about specifics, but they reached out with a project, and I'm like, this sounds super cool. Like this is cool enough to where I'm excited to get involved with it. and I'll take money for it because that's great because I'm pausing the stuff that I'm doing. But like, I don't need the money because I've got all of my bills paid in my 8 to 5. And does that mean that I am able to produce less? I have to limit the amount of what I'm doing. Yes. But I think I would have to do that as well if I was full-time freelance.
Yeah.
I would also have to limit the passionate, fun, personal things that I'm doing because either way, you've got to make money somehow. And for me, if I were to just jump into the freelance pool, I think I could do it, but I think it would ruin a lot of what makes it enjoyable and fulfilling to me.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that too, because the thing I quickly found while I was working freelance was that like the customer kind of wants specific things. And so even when I was getting hired for like my style to do stuff that I loved, like t-shirts or skateboard graphics or whatever it was, it's like it started to kind of my love for it died very quickly. My love for comics and autobiographical type comics that like don't make any money at all. Well, they make some money, but not a lot. That's never dissipated. And so like for me, whatever feeds that thing, whatever feeds the art thing that's like outside of the work thing, is where I want to be, like where I can like schedule out enough time to be able to put out like a graphic novel or two. And to me, like where I'm at with art direction and stuff is like what's allowed me to do that when I'm not at the job. Whereas if I were to just be freelance, I would be doing just nonstop like t-shirts or whatever it is for clients. And I don't know. I don't feel like the joy and the hustle anymore with that kind of thing.
Yeah, for me, it was working for a studio. I just felt creatively drained at the end of the day. When you're working 12 to 16 hours a day, hitting corporate deadlines, it just takes it out of you. And so now I'm at this job, and I wear a lot of hats, like web designer and print ad design, whatnot. But it gives me access to some really cool stuff that like I print T-shirts here for the business, plus for employees and everything. But now I have access to a screen printing machine and screens, and now I can print my own shirts. And so it's things like that you sometimes you just get lucky and you find the right job. So that's why for me now I'm like, man, do I just go full freelance because I love to do it and love to give it a try, but at the same time it's like this job that I have now, yeah, it's a good 9 to 5, and it has benefits that would benefit me doing freelance.
Yeah. And I think it's not necessarily an either or situation. It's probably a very personal decision based on every single person, because I mean,
Yeah.
I find what Scott is doing to be amazing, because I think I would probably be more like Josh, where Scott is able to produce stuff that he likes doing. He's able to produce stuff that he likes doing that makes money. And then he's able to, occasionally take a job where he tells everybody no, and then they really want him. And so he makes enough to make it worth it. And there's a balance of kind of those three things where, where I'm kind of in a similar situation to you, Gerald, where like my job doesn't drain me creatively, but it also gives me access to things that I wouldn't have access to otherwise. That kind of like helps me, like the personal work that I do in the evenings and on the weekends and during lunch hours and stuff makes me better at my day job. And so everybody at my day job is excited for me to do these things because it makes me a better teacher and it makes me more relevant. And so they're willing to give me equipment and resources and things and access to things that I don't have to buy or pay for. And I get to use that stuff to make whatever I want. And so it's like this nice, like kind of reciprocal process where it like feeds everything, but it doesn't drain like that stuff. And so I think there's probably as many answers. Like if you're looking at all of these things as little sliders, I think everybody's sliders would be in different positions based on circumstances and personality and all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, So it's interesting because so when you say that you want to strike out on your own, are you talking about like the ideal situation would be you're making stickers and T-shirts and
Yeah. So I have a friend I graduated with from college, and that has been his job. So he tried to work for game studios and stuff, just never found one that would take him in. And so he's just been like running conventions and doing his own work ever since. And man, he's been widely successful at it until
cool.
pandemic happened, and then of course he had to take a 9 to 5. But he's getting right back into it, and that allowed him to be able to pick and choose like freelance jobs where he was designing like packaging for board games and whatnot, just doing artwork for that.
Cool.
Plus commissions and making his own work for conventions. And I don't know, it's kind of where I want to be. Like I want to be able to make my own product, be able to sell my own wares, create the things that I want to do. So it's more, and I know like business wise, you're not doing it for yourself. You have a clientele that you want to hit, target. But still at the same time, it's more of like I get to choose what I use my talent for.
Right.
So Gerald, real quick, like, do you envision that like freelance will give you more time than you have now to work on fulfilling projects?
No.
Yeah.
The reality of it, looking at the other side of what my friend is doing, his other side is pretty much 9 to 5 social media,
right?
And creating a presence. So to build a clientele or build a customer base for his product, and so I get there's a lot of other marketing and other things behind it.
Well, no, I was only asking that specifically because I almost wonder if, like Corey was saying, maybe it's not like what I would do before. I guess what I'm saying is like I would start building the vision now, for the thing you'd want to do if you didn't work there. Because like if you build that up, then you can kind of start test flying it. And if you have trouble building it or dedicating time to like the capital A art stuff, right? If you have trouble making time with like a steady 9 to 5 that's a decent gig doing that, you're going to have 3 times as much trouble, I'd say, like doing what Scott's doing,
Yeah.
Because Scott, like, I guess the part that we haven't talked about with Scott and his transition or whatever is like, you were already kind of on the horse of like building all of those extra products and stuff.
Yeah.
Scott, when all this happened, you kind of kept the horse moving.
Yeah. It's not like a light switch where one day you just jumped from one thing to the other thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that it was built concurrently. And so like, I do think I'll backtrack on something I said. If in 5 or 10 years, I'm able to continue to do whatever I want without changing anything, and somehow magically there's an audience that is willing to support me on that, I would 100% stop going to my day job and quit and just do that. And that is a possibility. And that's kind of what Scott did, is you were building that type of thing up while you were working, right? And so I think that's that's the best situation. I think for anybody, I would suggest this. You do your personal project, so like you right now put yourself on a schedule and you're going to produce, a sticker a week or whatever it is. You market it as much as you're comfortable with or as little as you're comfortable with. And if that brings you creative fulfillment and you get, a dozen or so people that buy your stuff every once in a while, that's rad. If that becomes the thing that you can jump to because it grows into a big enough lifeboat that it turns into a ship and you jump to it, hey, that's rad too. Like kind of both of those situations can be really, really fulfilling as long as your day job isn't like awful and killing you, like if it's terrible, that's a whole different story. But if it's one of those situations, like what Josh and I are doing, like I'm sure Josh that you'd be happy if your books took off to the point where, you know, it was double your day job income, that you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm so sad that I don't get to work a day job anymore. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
if somebody were to come to you and say, I want you to do these books that you hate, it's not like you're going to quit your day job it's not like the book
No.
itself is
Yeah.
the thing. It's the expression that is core to who you are. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say is I would love to see more two-headed giant stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I want to see more of that stuff. And
because Gerald,
one or two paths is going to happen. Either it's really fulfilling creatively and really fun, and you get to do that for the rest of your career, or it actually gets big enough to become the thing that supports you, and it's really creative and really fun, and you get to do that for the rest of your life.
And Gerald, also the thing is, like, you know, with a day job or whatever, like quite often, you know, Corey and I will meet people, you know, who will kind of be like, well, you know, you put out all this creativity during the day, then you get home, you just need to decompress and blah, blah, blah. Right. That's not the case. You get home and you choose to decompress. Right.
Right.
And so it's like, you know, I think I kind of want to hear from Scott on this, but it's like, I think Scott had already built a habit when he was at a day job of building his own stuff and kind of laying the groundwork quite a bit during that, so that when that fell out, he had like a bunch of stuff already kind of filtered out there to kind of move to. I don't know if that makes sense. Scott, am I getting that wrong? Or
No. I mean, I that was sort of a goal, but it wasn't. It was that goal sort of became a necessity when I got laid off. You know. Whereas
Yeah.
Before, I'd like to have this supplemental income and everything, and then oh well, what do I do now? I guess while I'm doing this other stuff anyway, let me see what I can do with it. Let me see if I can grow this to a certain point, you know, and
yeah.
you know.
I don't know. So what do you think, Gerald? What sounds good? What are you disagreeing with? What do you agree with?
Oh no, I it's all good. Like it's giving me some meat to chew on, some things to think about. Really evaluate like what I have going on now, plus, you know, and one of the things I have been learning, you know, especially working a studio job and being a full-time, you know, graphic designer, like even if you choose to go home and decompress and stuff, you still want to be competitive. Even just for studio jobs, you still have to keep creating.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I gotten back into figure drawing again and trying to be more, you know, active in my, you know, keeping my talents up or my skills up. But, you know, yeah, I see where you guys are going. You know, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think that's where, you know, I really got into that mindset of, you know, you either do one or you do the other. And that's the way life works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that kind of false dichotomy, it ruins a lot of things for people. I also think like, I question the mentality of like, your art isn't valid if it doesn't make you money. You know what I mean? Like there's this thing out there that a lot of people younger than the four of us will think that like, I'll be a real artist when people pay me or whatever. And it's like, money is not the thing that validates art. Like that's, you know, and so like money is kind of an incidental thing to it. If it comes, that's great. If it doesn't, like Neil Gaiman wrote a thing and it was just so awesome. And he said it a lot better than I did, but he said, write because you want to write and create what you want to create, because every time you do it for money, it basically ruins it. And most of the time the money doesn't come. Like if you're chasing money, it often doesn't come. But if you're chasing what you want out of it and what the passion that you have for it, or the love that you have for it, or the connection that you have for it, oftentimes the money will follow that, because that's actually what people are more interested in. You know, I'm a lot less interested in somebody who's chasing what they think is going to be trending versus like, who are you as a person? I'd much rather, you know, give money to somebody who like is authentically expressing themselves than somebody who's trying to game the system or trick the algorithm or do this to the thing or chase this trend or whatever.
Right.
So
I've seen that personally because when I first got out of college, that's what it was about. It was just like you're trying to get work, you're trying to get a job, you're trying to make the money, and it's just money, money, money.
yeah,
When I finally just stopped doing that and was just like, I'm just going to make art and build a portfolio, I guess was my excuse. But then I just started doing things that I liked. All of a sudden, you know, I started getting freelance work and then graphic design jobs and then, you know, end up working for Curious Media. And like all those things came to me. Like I wasn't out actively looking for them.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Is I tend to think that that type of thing, that money follows humanity more so than follows somebody chasing money. And it's almost like a, I don't know if that's ironic, but it's one of those like inverted situations where
Yeah.
it's kind of like somebody who is desperate to be liked tends to do the type of behavior that makes them unlikable. But somebody who's just a good and nice person that cares about other people and is kind, but they're not desperate to be liked, people tend to want to be around that person more, you know? And it's almost like in their desperation to be liked, they're like ruining all of their personal relationships. So it's like causing more desperation. It's kind of that vicious cycle. It's a similar thing of like, I'm desperate for my art to make money. And so I'm going to do all this stuff that actually is detrimental to your art making money. It's just a weird cycle that way. But, yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting. Like at work right now, we're talking about, and I messaged some of you guys about this. Like, I think higher education has a huge problem that we're trying to solve, not just at my university, but everywhere, of like, what is the value that we're adding to this situation? You know, like, are we still creating something that is worthwhile? You know, and I think that there is huge value in higher education, but I think it's going to have to change and adapt to like current trends. And so we're looking at like, you know, is a certificate worth it? Does somebody have to get a degree to be able to do these things? And these are all kind of questions that, you know, in certain situations, yeah, you need a degree, but the degree doesn't get you the job. It's like a ticket to the interview. And in other situations, it's like nobody cares about the degree at all. They just want you to have the skill and the thinking.
I've never been asked if I had a degree in any interview.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so, but then people will say, well, then education isn't valuable. And I'm like, oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
Education is valuable because not everyone can apply rigor to themselves to get to the level where you're thinking and creating along those lines. Some people need a push. And so, you know, I am one of those people that's like, I think it's really dangerous to say everyone should get a degree. I think that's a stupid and dangerous thing to say, because I think there are a lot of people that, like, the world needs tradesmen, the world needs plumbers, and the world needs all types of things. And those can be very fulfilling jobs that allow you freedom to create whatever you want when you're not doing that thing. And then there's also self-motivated people that are able to develop themselves in the skills and the thinking that it takes to do those things without direction and without somebody pushing them and without those types of things. I had a huge value in my master's degree, and I feel like it was like an accelerant, you know, like I'm a very self-driven person, but I feel like I kind of went through like a boom tube in my master's because it accelerated that type of thing. But it's an interesting discussion, and it's kind of like everything else that we're talking about. Applying one answer to every person on earth is just a stupid thing to do, you know? And so I don't know. All of that is to say, it's kind of interesting to say, like, what is an artist and what is an artist's value in the current marketplace is a very individual answer. Sorry, go ahead.
I think one thing that I benefited from college, and that I even see as an artist, is critical thinking and problem solving skills. I feel like as an artist, that's basically my job, is problem solving and critical thinking. Like, how am I going to overcome this obstacle? And then, you know, I find the answer, I work it out, you know. And I just feel like if we applied how general classes are taught in college to a high school level, I almost don't see the point of college, at least for an artist, anyways. But yeah, it's definitely gaining, critical thinking and problem solving skills that we use every day in our everyday lives as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is like I hate when people kind of boil down like the idea of higher education as like almost like a trade school, because
Right.
like there is a value in the humanities and there's a value in
Mhm.
learning how to think. And
Yeah.
I'm glad, Gerald, you mentioned like critical thinking too, because it's like, even colleges that specialize specifically in art, I feel like they're really robbing artists when they'll skip over like prerequisites that are general ed kind of
Mhm.
requirements, because you benefit so much as an artist having a wealth of information from like English literature, from history, like from science, like from mathematics, like all of those things benefit and feed a creative to a grand degree and also make better citizens. That's all, so to me I feel like there's a much higher importance to college education that goes beyond just like will it get you a job when you get out,
Right.
Yeah.
at the best schools, I should say.
Or if we're not focused on thinking at all, then you have a lot of graduates who can make a really well rendered duck. And it's
True.
like
And a lot of
that's
boring portfolios to review if you're an art director.
oh yeah. Yeah, that's another thing. So one of the main classes that I teach, we have a project that's like that duck thing. And I just have people like photorealistically render a watch in Illustrator. And the really savvy students are like, why are we doing this? Like, and I'm like, this is not something that you will do in the industry anymore. It used to be, there used to be a lot of this, but you would actually use Maya or Blender or, and mock it up in 3D. What I'm doing is I want you to be able to see things that you couldn't see before. I'm rewiring your brain to be able to see the highlights and the shadows and the shapes that you couldn't see before and apply that to something. That will be valuable later when you're trying to abstract stuff. But right now, yes, for the next 2 weeks, you are technically creating something that is very difficult and kind of pointless if the only thing that you're looking at is, look, I made a watch look like that photo. But if you look at it like, I've rewired my brain to see things in an observational way that I can now abstract into other things, it's very, very valuable. And so I'm trying to get them to understand like the point of those things, even though the activity is creating something that is kind of pointless. But the learning and the growth that happens through that is in the thinking. And that's kind of the educational part that I'm trying to get everybody to get, is like, the value that you get out of this is not that you have a piece for your portfolio, but that you are better at thinking than you were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I remember that assignment. My watch was not very good, but I learned a lot about Illustrator, and I learned a lot about, what you were saying, just seeing things that I would have missed normally without studying it and looking at the intricacies of everything.
Do you remember the conversation we had? It was years ago, and I was telling these guys before you logged on, where you came to me and you said, oh, I've got a huge problem. I said, what? And you're like, I love doing this. And I was like, why is that a huge problem? And you're like, you just matter of factly said, oh, well, you can't do this in the industry. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's like so many different things. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, I do. Even now I have a hard time explaining, like, well, are you an illustrator or a graphic designer? I'm like, I'm somewhere in between. Like,
yeah,
I can't really classify it,
Yeah.
And I love it. I love still doing what I do, and yeah, I see the application of it everywhere.
Yeah. My master's degree is in the intersection of illustration and design. and all of my illustration teachers would start criticizing me by saying, your problem is that you think like a designer. And all of my design teachers would start criticizing me by saying, your problem is that you think like an illustrator. And I'm like, my problem must be that I don't think like either of you, I think, because I see or whatever.
I've heard the same thing too from my illustration teachers. You think like a designer.
Yeah.
Very logical.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, we're at about an hour and 10. Should we kind of do some final thoughts and wrap up? Anything you guys want to add before we close? I want to read Adam's comment here. I brought it up on the screen, but you guys are great role models for younger artists. So many people are fixated on making a living doing comics or art, no matter what, without taking into consideration the points that you've brought up. And yeah, I really do think it's a very nuanced and personal decision and situation. I almost recoil anytime anybody gives any really general or advice that they feel like it applies to everybody. The only thing that I think is applicable advice to every single person out there who wants to do something like this is kind of what we were talking about of like, everybody should be making what you want to make a little bit, at least a little bit. You should be spending some of your time doing something just because you want to do it. I think that's one of the most valuable things you can do, whether you're full freelance or whether you're part-time or whether you've got a day job or not, or you're working for somebody that you think is the best, or you're working for somebody that you hate. No matter what it is, that's like a one universal, I think, is that I've seen in so many different situations be the best activity that you can do for success.
Yeah. Love it.
I'd like to add to that for college students, those who are in school now. One thing that I really hated about college was learning all these really cool things and new techniques and stuff, and then you move on to the next thing so fast. And then you kind of forget about it. Man, if you find something that works for you, like keep at it. Keep doing the studies with it. Keep applying it to every other class that you're doing so you get good at it,
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of personalize your own experience instead of just being a follower. You kind of like tailor it to what it is that you want to do. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, good. Well, I think that was a good discussion. Thanks for coming on. I think everybody, if you haven't looked at Gerald's stuff, go jump on his Instagram. And you still have a lot of that for sale, right? People can order a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very. If you like kind of thinking based illustration and design where it kind of raises a lot of questions and it kind of shines a light into some of the corners of society, there's some really good stuff at Two-Headed Giants over there, and I would check that out for sure. I've always really enjoyed. I've got a couple stickers that are on my laptop case that I got years ago, and I still kind of enjoy those. So let's wrap this up. Gerald, where can people go find your stuff? And if there's one thing that everybody watching this could do, what do you want them to do? Go to your store, go to your Instagram? What's the kind of
honestly, go to my Instagram, check out the artwork there. Obviously there's links to all my shops there on Instagram, but you know what, stop by, look at the art, and if you have any questions, feel free to message me.
Yeah, cool. And Josh, where can we find your stuff?
You can find my stuff hopefully at your local library. And if you don't find it at your library, ask a librarian to carry this. Jacob's Apartment by Joshua Kemble. It's available through the Diamond Order catalog. And so I'm just going to go to a library or a bookstore and ask them to order this for you. If you haven't read this yet, what are you doing? It's if you took Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind and Ghost World, put them in a blender, you'd have this wonderful, the feeling of this book, which you should all purchase. And then Two Stories is my graphic novel about faith and mental illness. Make sure you pick that up if you haven't yet. And then aside from that, there's some really cool music that's free. You can get it on Spotify and every streaming platform. No saboteurs, no emperors, as well as no saboteurs. Good bees don't die. Check it out, and then next time we do Artcasters or a stream or anything like that, feel free to make fun of me if you don't like the music. Okay.
And I will say, Josh gave me a preview of that a year or two ago. I can't remember how long. It was a while ago, and there's stuff I hadn't heard, and the mastering I think is really good. There's some very good and interesting songs in there. So go check that out for sure. I was probably bugging him because I was listening to it like super late at night, and then at the end of every song I'd be like, I hadn't heard that one. That one's awesome. I like this one too. So I was just sending a bunch of messages. Yeah, go check that out. And you can find my stuff at CoreyKerr.com. And I am currently working on a thing that I'm very excited about that I haven't really quantified into like an elevator pitch, but it's going to involve like common themes of things that I talk about a lot, like some solutions and ways of thinking, and also every different way that I think society could end. And we're going to kind of mash all that up into one big giant project. It's going to include everything from like all the bees dying to like the singularity of the robots taking over and everything in between, of like us getting so productive at food production that we don't realize that we're like running out of resources. There's all kinds of different existential threats to society that we're doing different illustrations for, which might sound horrific. And it is, but you should, if you want to jump on and get involved with that stuff. I'm trying to slow my process down and do a very detailed style of illustration that I haven't done in a few years. I feel like I got really fast, and I'm really enjoying spending a lot of time, like spending a week on an illustration rather than spending a day on an illustration. It's kind of changed what I'm doing. So if you're interested in that type of thing, then get on my email newsletter. And because that's where I'm really kind of doing this, and I'll be releasing videos. I've already released a couple that are kind of explaining some of those things and showing a lot of the behind the scenes process. I did one recently where I was showing how I used like a topographical heat map to be able to lay out where I should do different types of shading. Even though I'm only using black, that's the only value that I have, those types of things. And so if you're into that level of detail, or possibly helping society not end, jump on my email newsletter and that will help. Scott, where can we find your stuff?
So if you're interested in kind of what we talked about here, if you are either looking to get into doing art, or if you are already doing art and you want just more content as far as the business of art, there's tons of that stuff on my YouTube channel. I mean, usually every week I put out a video talking about just this kind of stuff. So definitely check that out. Or if you're particularly interested in making comics, I've got my series Making Comics 101. It's a full free course on YouTube. That is also available on my YouTube channel at Circlix Art Lab, or you can go to my website, and I've got a bunch of digital toolkits and comics and prints and all kinds of stuff there. So definitely check that out. Other than that, the show, we do the Artcasters. We do this show every single week. This week it's on Corey's channel. Next week I believe it's going to be on Josh's channel, then mine, and it kind of rotates around. Usually on Thursday, but who knows? We may do it on Wednesday one day, and you never know. So the easiest way to know exactly when we're going to go live, whose channel we're going to be on, who the guest is going to be on, what the topic is just to join our mailing list. There's a link in the description of this video. Click on that, join the mailing list. We don't spam you. Usually about 30 minutes before we go live, we will send out an invite. We'll tell you exactly where to go, because YouTube doesn't always inform you when we go live. So that's the best way to be in the know if you want some great, interesting content like this. So check it out.
Cool. All right, guys, we'll see you all next week.
Can I give a super quick plug?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
I just remind everybody, stand in solidarity with the women of Iran and their fight that's going on right now. If there's any way you can show any kind of support for them, or even just bringing awareness to the situation, please do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great.